I'm joined by the wonderful Norwegian pianist Leif Ove Andsnes, really one of my favorite pianists of all time, one of the preeminent pianists of our generation. And we can always count on you to introduce us to music in a new and thoughtful way. And you've definitely done that with this collection that we're going to talk about, the Dvorak Poetic Tone Pictures. First of all, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And
Thank you very
also
much.
tell us a little bit about what these are, because people think of Dvorak, they think of the symphonies or some of the chamber music. This particular piece for solo piano has been completely off my radar, and I assume for other listeners as well.
Absolutely. And there is a strange reputation with Dvorak and his piano music. And it comes from the fact that he wasn't a pianist. He was a string player. He was an amateur organ player, but it was a long time until he actually owned a piano. And the reputation is that he couldn't really write for the piano. Yes, there are a few awkward moments here and there where you feel, when you play this music, that it physically is not as natural for the hands to do what he asks us to do as it is when you play a piece by Schumann or Chopin or Debussy or Rachmaninoff.
Yeah.
But I would say rather the contrary. With these pieces, he is though creating wonderful colors at the piano and really using the piano in its full range. And then for the places where there's some awkwardness in the writing, you have to maybe distribute the hands differently, find fingerings for it, work on it. But I mean, there's so many composers that have those moments, and the music is absolutely glorious. It's written also in a time of great production in his life. He was writing the 8th Symphony around the same time. His Requiem, his famous piano quintet in A major had just been written a couple of years before. This is sort of his best period, and he's starting to write programmatic music with descriptive titles, which seems to have made, his imagination, to spark his imagination, and I love these pieces, and I think they should be known in the world. And I'm very surprised when I speak with my colleagues, and so few of them know them.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you why you think that is, but first of all, tell us a little bit of your history. You first played one of these pieces, or the first piece, when you were 12 years old, yeah?
I strangely got to know these pieces as a child because my father, I think rather randomly, picked up an LP once he was in London with the Czech pianist Radoslav Kvapil playing these Poetic Tone Pictures. And I listened especially to the first pieces again and again as a child, and I liked them very much. And I played the very first piece in a youth competition when I was 12. Later on, I played a group of them in a few recitals in my 20s. And then I sort of forgot about them, or had them in my back of my head. And then I read a quote from Dvorak a few years ago where he said that he had meant for them to be played all together. He hoped somebody would have the courage to be played all together, because only then could one really understand his intention about these pieces. And I thought, that's interesting, because that's really a very ambitious undertaking. I mean, we're talking 55 minutes of music here, almost an hour. And so that's a very unusual length of a piano cycle. And then I started thinking that I should study them, and then pandemic came over us, and everybody had a bit more time to study new things, and that's what I decided to do, to study this cycle. And I'm so happy I did, because I do feel what a great journey it is to play all of these pieces together.
Yeah. Well, why do you think that? I mean, you're painting a great picture of how wonderful these pieces are, and I've listened to them and I enjoy it immensely. Why do you think that it hasn't caught on with the classical listening public as much?
Well, it is strange how when certain ideas are set, like, oh, Dvorak was not a pianist, he didn't really write great piano music, then people just believe that, you know. Even I played these pieces in Prague in the Czech Republic 3-4 weeks ago, and even they told me that it's not standard repertoire even in their country. Some pianists play some of it, but not they don't take it that seriously.
Yeah,
which is crazy. I mean, it's their composer. It's their great composer. I mean, they're famous, most famous internationally renowned composer. So, and I think the other problem or challenge is that we pianists have so much to choose from. We have such a wealth of repertoire at our hands. So people end up doing the same wonderful iconic pieces again and again, the Mozart, Beethoven, Chopin pieces, Schumann, and then we forget about other beloved composers like Dvorak that didn't write such famous piano music, but also could be wonderful. So I've always liked this feeling of being able to introduce something which is wonderful that people don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's wonderful. And I also sense kind of a kinship with some of the classic song cycles, not in the music, but maybe in the concept and the way that all these different character pieces kind of come together as a whole. Would you consider it sort of like a cycle itself, the whole thing?
Yes. I mean, one cannot pinpoint to say that, oh, there's a connection between this piece and you hear what it's coming back in the fifth piece, what you hear in the first one, and so on. It's not in that sort of way. The pieces stand on their own, and they are very contrasting. But he very intelligently built the cycle on storytelling, on the different contrasts. And when you get to the end of the cycle, the two last pieces become sort of very spiritual. The penultimate piece is called At the Hero's Grave. It's heroic, it's rather pompous, it's also very sad. And then the very last piece is On a Holy Mountain, which is a sort of exalted prayer, and very spiritual piece, a very wonderful also farewell to the cycle, to what we've been through, and it's very touching how it ends. And then one really feels like this was a coherent whole,
like a journey.
It belongs to,
I mean, the first piece is very different from the last piece. In between, there's a lot going on. Do you have any standouts or favorite sections that you enjoy playing or listening to?
I enjoy so many of them in different ways. I mean, when I play, I sometimes choose one as an encore. And for instance, the Spring Song number 4 is very appealing. It has relation to, kind of Mendelssohn's Song Without Words, or the Schumann pieces. Another one which I find very special, and which I think shows very much the talent of Dvorak, is the Serenade number 9, which starts off like a trivial piece, almost like a very simple melody for the first minute, and you think, okay, is this it? And then and then at a certain point he changes the harmonies and goes into a different landscape, but still with the same melody, but he totally changes it, and it becomes very spiritual and wonderfully passionate. And you think that is really a talent, to be able to take the same material, very simple material, and to shape it in such a way that it becomes such a jewel. I think he could do that in a unique way.
You've talked about Dvorak's piano music as a whole, and he wrote maybe 20-something individual pieces for the piano. Where does this particular piece fit into like his symphonies or his chamber music? And I'm talking about his style, his compositional style. I mean, do you hear that and you think, oh, that's Dvorak right away, or was it?
I do, yeah, I do, because of the harmonies. It was particularly, I think there are certain bars where I could just say, oh, that it couldn't be written by anybody else than Dvorak. Here those shifts of harmony. On the other hand, because people are not used to hearing his piano music, I mean, they are not used to hearing they sometimes they say to me after concerts, it's such wonderful music, but I would never guess that it's Dvorak.
Yeah.
But that's maybe because we are not used to hear how he wrote on the piano. So I guess we are more used to hearing his way with the strings or with voices or so. But I think, and in terms of the programmatic aspect of it, I think one could maybe more compare it with some of the symphonic poems from later on than anything else. And some of the chamber music, which I love. I mean, like that famous piano quintet, which is written around the same time, and which I played many times.
Well, I noticed in these works there's a lot of folk music. I mean, there's a lot of great melodies that come forth, and I also hear hints of like a little Chopin, maybe a little Grieg, some of the other pianist composers. You know, I hear that a little bit in this music as well.
Sure.
Do you think Dvorak was intentional about incorporating all of that stuff into his music?
I think so. Maybe also because he wasn't so confident when it came to piano writing, as he wasn't a pianist. So he was turning to music that he knew written for the piano and that he knew worked. Like I mentioned, the Spring Song, built on a sort of Mendelssohn technique with a melody on top and wonderful accompaniment, lively accompaniment under. The Goblin's Dance could be related to Grieg, for instance. I think, you know, some of the troll pieces by Grieg. In the Bacchanalia, there's a scherzo which is like he has really copied the piano technique of Chopin's third scherzo. You know, it's very similar, and things like that, but it's done with such a strong signature. His harmonies, his way of characterization. So it never feels like a pastiche, but he would take certain aspects of things from other composers. But
I never thought I'd be talking about new music from Dvorak, but that's essentially what's going on here. I had some interesting facts about you sent over from your manager. I wonder if I can run a couple past you before we go, because I'm curious about you playing the sousaphone when you were a teenager. How'd you get with the sousaphone?
Well, the euphonium I played, you know, which is like a small tuba. My father was a band conductor, and so it was very much brass bands were very much part of the area where I grew up on the western part of Norway, and it was quite important for me when I was 13, 14 years old. But then, you know, a couple of years later, I did discover that the piano playing had more substance in my life than the
Do you still pick up a euphonium? You still pick one up from time to time?
No, my parents had a wedding anniversary a couple of years ago, and we tried to play, my sisters and I, on our old instruments, and it didn't go very well. So I think it will be another decade before I pick it up again.
Now, I also saw in here some of the unusual places that you have performed, like the edge of a cliff, underwater, on an oil rig. I mean, where do these ideas come from? What's the strangest place, or maybe perhaps the most unusual place you've ever performed on the piano?
Well, it was quite spectacular when we took a piano up on a mountain in Norway. It was part of a TV documentary that I was making about Grieg, and it was called Ballad for Edvard Grieg, and it was about his ballad for solo piano at 20 minutes. Kind of dramatic piece written in a special time of Grieg's life, and full of challenges and so on. And part of the story of the documentary was that Grieg loved the mountains and loved to hike in the mountains, and so we thought, okay, we bring a piano to a mountain, and we had the most spectacular day when we were going to shoot this. So there was snow in the mountains and sunshine. It was a beautiful summer day actually, but still with snow. So, and then a helicopter was circling around me while I played, and so there are some spectacular shots from that, of course.
You're probably the only pianist that can say that a helicopter was circling around you as you played.
Yeah.
Right? So you recorded
I guess so.
you recorded this album in Trondheim, yeah, at the concert hall there.
I did, because we were still in the middle of the pandemic, and I thought I was basically just staying in my country. And but Norway hadn't been completely closed. I'd been able to do a few concerts here and there, and for small audiences, sometimes down to 50 people, up to 200, never more than 200 because of the restrictions. And I'd played a couple of times in Trondheim, and I thought, oh, they have a wonderful Steinway there. It's a good hall. I could record there. So that's how we ended up recording in Trondheim in April of 21, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I read on your calendar that you're coming to Cleveland, which is just a couple of hours over from us.
That's
next
right.
April. Yeah.
I believe that I've played once in Toledo with the Cleveland Orchestra.
Oh, okay.
years and years ago. But I'm coming in the spring, and I'm doing another unusual piece, the Debussy Fantasy for piano and orchestra, which is very rarely played. It's a young Debussy, very beautiful piece.
Well, maybe that'll show up on your album radar in the future, right?
Hopefully.
Yeah. Leif Ove Andsnes, a wonderful pianist. Latest album is music of Antonin Dvorak, the Poetic Tone Pictures, out now from Sony Classics. We'll be sure to link to your website and your social media, because there's a wealth of things there that people can dive into as well. But thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And thank you for the music.
Thanks a lot. Pleasure to talk with you.